The Sacramento Kings made one of the biggest splashes of the offseason in acquiring 6-time All-Star DeMar DeRozan via sign and trade. DeRozan instantly becomes arguably the biggest signing in Sacramento free agency history and gives the Kings one of the best scorers of this generation. However, despite the talent that DeRozan is, this move was met with almost immediate skepticism from analysts and people on social media. Most of the questions that people have make sense. How will DeMar, another non-shooter who is known for his on-ball usage, fit and mesh around De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis in Sacramento's movement-based offense? Can the Kings survive defensively, bringing in another scoring-focused player on the perimeter? These are questions that I hope to at least somewhat answer in this video, as well as analyzing the skill set that DeRozan brings the Kings. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the tape. Despite their label as a no defense and all offense group, the Kings were actually a very balanced two-way unit last season. They finished 13th and 14th in offensive and defensive efficiency respectively, and it was actually their defense that carried them down the stretch. Sacramento dealt with injuries to guys like Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk late in the season, which inserted Keon Ellis into the starting lineup. And from March 6th on, the day that Keon permanently entered the rotation, the Kings had the number 3 defense in the league. This was over a 22-game sample as well, with 15 of those games being against playoff teams. Sacramento still maintained the 14th offense during the stretch, though they lost countless games as their offense stalled late in games. The problem was the lack of creators. With Monk injured, Fox was the only real ball handler on the roster, and that's always going to be a tough hurdle to overcome over 4 quarters. From Sacramento's perspective, they have a really balanced core group of players, especially in the starting lineup. And it was just really missing that one creator, someone who can generate rim pressure, consistent offense for himself and others, and that guy is DeMar DeRozan. The immediate question everyone had is whether or not DeRozan fits on this roster, and rightfully so. DeRozan is a low volume and inefficient 3-point shooter who doesn't provide much value on the defensive side of the ball, so how's it gonna work then? For one, it's a massive talent upgrade over what was there. Harrison Barnes really struggled in Sacramento last season, and is significantly worse fit with the starting group than DeMar is. I don't want to go too hard on HB because we all love him and wish him the best in San Antonio, but he was a pretty bad negative on the court that unfortunately Mike Brown loved a little bit too much. Barnes gave you virtually nothing in regards to creation, playmaking, defense, and rebounding, but he was always a pretty consistent 3-point shooter. Even then, he wasn't a real floor spacer or someone the defense feared, so I'm not sure how much you're actually even losing there. What DeMar is a bucket. When your offense stalls late in possessions, he can always generate an efficient mid-range pull-up. DeRozan once again led the league in mid-range attempts, though he only shot 43% on those attempts last season, which is a bit of a down year for him. But he did generate 1.1 points per possession in isolation, putting him in the 86th percentile as an ISO scorer. And he's still as dominant as ever as an ISO scorer. Switch a smaller defender on him and he'll put his back to the basket and just walk you into the paint. But DeMar's handle and driving threat makes him a matchup problem for bigger guys as well, and giving him this much space is just going to give him a practice jumper. With DeRozan's heavy volume of mid-rangers in his shot diet, spacing is never really an issue for him in manufacturing his own offense. Teams can load defenders on the backline like OKC here, put them in the gaps. I mean, look how far this dude is stunning over one pass away, and it just doesn't matter. There's 3 New Orleans defenders in the paint when DeMar gets there here, but that doesn't affect him since he was hunting this midi the entire time. When operating out of the pick and roll or off handoffs, DeRozan can punish defenders who go under screens or bigs who take deep drops with these mid-range pull-ups. So defenders typically still go over ball screens against DeMar, even way outside like here. And if the big doesn't step up, that's going to be an easy pull-up. So the Knicks not only have their best defender on him in OG, he's going over ball screens from 30 plus feet out with your starting center coming out above the 3-point line. And even then DeMar can still maneuver to his spots and generate a good look. DeMar was an incredibly efficient pick and roll ball handler last season, ranking in the 92nd percentile at 1.06 points per possession. The biggest thing with DeMar is that he's just a tough shot maker. These contests don't really bother him. As long as he can get to his spots in the short mid-range, there's really nothing you can do as a defense. When he's cut off, he'll just spin off you into a jumper, and he absolutely kills defenders with this. He'll use that downward momentum against players, either using his body or arm to create space when getting downhill. He also just gives the Kings someone who can generate rim pressure and get to the line and actually convert there. He's got every tool in the bag to attack coming off screens. Watch him put Aaron Gordon in gel here and snake back to his right to use Drummond as a Gortat screen. Here Drummond flips the screen to counter the defender that's icing it. DeMar hits the big with a Euro getting downhill, and this is an unbelievable double clutch reverse finish through contact. Get caught flat-footed or overplay the screen and he can easily reject it, and it's just incredible watching him maneuver through tight spaces. A lot of his attacking style is this change of pace and just slicing through defenders. He's so deceptive with the ball in his hands. By all accounts, it looks like he's setting up to snake back middle here, especially with the spacing on this side of the court, but instead he takes one step middle, changes directions and protects the ball, somehow splitting two lengthy defenders in Precious Achiuwa and Scotty Barnes. DeMar shot 65% in the restricted area and 68% within 3 feet last season, and he's always been fairly efficient at the basket. It's really his footwork that stands out. He's awesome playing off 2 feet and kills defenders with these step throughs, spins, and up and unders. He's also such a tough player to gap or load up against off ball because he can get to the paint without exhausting much lateral movement. But again, you can see the kind of defensive attention that he got in Chicago, though some teams threw even more at him. For instance, the Kings were one of the teams that heavily blitzed DeMar off screens and consistently threw 2 defenders at him on post-ups and certain game situations. The thing is, DeMar is so unselfish that he'll make the right basketball play almost every time. On the double cent, he would just skip it immediately to make the defense rotate. Every blitz screen he hit Vooch on the short roll, and if you don't blitz and have the weak side rotate over, then he'll just make that skip pass himself. And if you were wondering, he still scored 33 points on 12 shots in a game that he got this kind of defensive attention, and he did so by doing what he does best, dominating in the fourth quarter. He led the league in fourth quarter scoring once again, and was second only to Steph in clutch points. This game at Golden One Center that really only happened a few months ago is just one of his signature performances, and one that he went 7 for 7 for 19 points in the fourth quarter alone. But it's his passing ability that gets overlooked in my opinion, an area in which DeRozan has grown tremendously in since his days in San Antonio. 5.3 assists to just 1.7 turnovers last season speaks volumes considering his heavy usage and minutes. He's not an incredibly advanced playmaker, but he's very unselfish and usually makes the right play. If he draws a big up, he'll dish it off. If you help in the gaps, he'll kick it out. And Mike Brown is going to absolutely love DeMar with how often he creates these spray 3-pointers. If you don't know, Brown always preaches the importance about generating spray threes, which are essentially open looks from deep created by driving in the paint and kicking out. And DeMar creates a lot of really good shots here. In Sacramento, he'll have a lot of shooters on the wings to kick out too. Monk, Keegan, Fox, Lyles, and Keon were all about 37% and above on catch and shoot threes last season. And honestly, outside of Sabonis and DeRozan, basically everyone in the rotation will be a capable shooter. Even then, I mean, Domas did shoot at 38%, he just didn't shoot it much. DeMar was at just 33% himself on under 3 attempts per game, but he did shoot 39% on corner threes. Betting on DeMar to suddenly increase his 3-point volume at this point in his career is unlikely, so this is probably the only area you're taking a slight hit in going from HB to DeMar. But DeMar should slide in easily with some of the actions the Kings did run for Barnes. The Kings love this slice punch set, having Herter set a back screen to create a switch for HB, then letting Barnes isolate in the empty side mid-post. DeRozan himself is an 80th percentile post-up scorer. You can have DeMar just setting ball screens for Fox with decoy action in the back, cause some confusion off ball while creating a matchup that you like for DeMar. Mike Brown during the Summer League talked about wanting to integrate the Sabonis DHO game to accommodate DeRozan, so I fully expect to see him adapt to Sacramento's high post-driven offense. And I think you can get creative with it. You can run DeMar off this Spinoulis action the Kings love to do for both Herter and Fox. Sabonis is so easy to play off of that the fit should be seamless, plus DeMar already has the experience in playing this type of environment alongside Vucevic. Off the ball spacing shouldn't be an issue for DeRozan either. Despite his lack of 3-point shot, he still commands a ton of respect as a scorer. It's also tough not to respect him on the perimeter because he's really just one dribble away from getting to his spot. Defensively, he also slots in to fill the Harrison Barnes role at the 4, and the idea that the Kings lost something here just doesn't make sense. Purely looking at the numbers heavily favor DeRozan, and especially in terms of defensive playmaking. Barnes was an extremely low impact defender who, despite his size, offered virtually no rim protection with no lateral speed to defend on the perimeter to go alongside it. They both grade out with the same -0.6 defensive EPM though, because unfortunately at this stage in his career, DeMar isn't going to give you much here either. Much like HB, DeRozan just doesn't have the juice to defend on the perimeter anymore. He doesn't have that kind of lateral speed to stay with guards outside, and ideally you want him to avoid ever having to defend these guys in space. There aren't too many matchups that should make DeMar consistently chase guys off screens, which is good because again, yeah, it's just another area he doesn't really offer much right now. He also isn't some sort of ball hockey defensive playmaker, but he does collect some stocks and he didn't shy away about offering help at the rim. He also played the 4 defensively in Chicago, and I think some of his instincts and active hands are probably the biggest things that he gives you on this end. He's such a high IQ player, and one that you always think about the offensive side of the ball, but you'll see flashes of it on defense as well, especially with some of his anticipation off ball. This is what I mean just loading up early on the weak side and reading the eyes of the offensive player the entire time. DeMar's biggest issue defensively will likely be his overall motor. Between his age and presumed role in offense, it's tough for him to be locked in at all times on the court, and there's plenty of lapses, especially off ball. Ideally, a minutes and offensive usage decrease in Sacramento should enable him to have more energy to give you on defense. Now I hope I did a good job overall at showing you why I am personally very high on this fit. For all of the flaws that exist in DeMar's game, I think what he gives you is simply too valuable to pass up the chance to add to your team. And in reality, I think he gives you a lot of what you were missing down the stretch of last season anyways. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this breakdown. I'll be keeping the content coming out in the offseason, and I'll see you all next time.